Greetings, my fellow freedom lovers and sovereign thinkers. This is LL3's News Podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful land of enchantment, which is also known as New Mexico. And today's date, Friday, October 30th, 2015. Yep, Hallows Eve is just around the corner. And I know there's articles out there, people are talking about why, like, why you celebrate it. Some of them don't celebrate it based on their faith. But that'll be all the big trends, so I'm not going to really be addressing that on this show. However, I was just checking a few things. I tried to do one last night, but I had like some signal issues. But this going to be talking about the U.S. troops, boots on the ground in Syria, and of course, the warning with China against the United States on those territories, and interesting scandal that happened with the United Nations, child abuse images and so forth. Ooh, that's interesting as well. And I'm going to try to do a couple articles, at least an article, but I want to try to add two in there if possible. Plus, something interesting occurred with the whole Southern Poverty Law Center about saying they're unhinged by saying almost everyone is a conspiracy theorist. Oh yeah, those clowns. There's something else. Divide and conquer is their business. That's Southern Poverty Law Center. And I'm going to be hitting something interesting, which I heard on a podcast a few nights ago on Blog Talk Radio. And it's really, really good. It's a good one. Talked about, there's an interesting thing about low tolls and so forth. But one caught my attention is about the United States of America Department of Travel, which is interesting because on the private vehicle recordation system for non-commercial travel, they're telling you that it's a right to travel, not a privilege. Like driving a vehicle, non-commercial vehicle, is a right, not a privilege. And so I'm going to be skipping through, going through some of the details in here, and how you can get a right to travel ID card, and how about having vehicle license plates that it is for life. One fee, no renewal. That's something I'm going to be talking about. And it'll be interesting because like I read into this a few nights ago, and I'm like, it does have some merit, including court cases. So all those folks out there should always try to be vigilant when it comes to government. Like I always say, truth, justice, and the goody two shoes way is the road to nowhere. So we're just going to be starting this off, which came out, today. And this is from the RonPaulInstitute.org for peace and prosperity, to be exact. And this one here is going to be entitled, Breaking Obama Puts U.S. Boots in Syria. Where is Congress? This is by Daniel McAdams. And as it reads here, I will not put U.S. boots on the ground in Syria. That was the President Obama's unequivocal statement to the American people just 2 years ago when he first planned to bomb Syria. He repeated the statement several times, and he has also repeated his promise that he will not pursue a long air campaign in Syria and Iraq. Of course, we all know it came from his teleprompter. Obama lied, and he lied again, and he lied again. Today, when it was announced that he was putting U.S. boots on the ground in Syria, this move encapsulates Neocon occupied Washington's response to foreign policy failure. If an intervention is failing, escalate. It's like saying if the debt ceiling, raise the debt ceiling, doesn't mean we're being bigger debt, right? I want to tell you how damn stupid you folks are, but you know what? I'm going to continue on. This move encapsulates neocon. I already said that already. Oops. The year-long U.S. bombing campaign to degrade and ultimately destroy ISIS have produced little results. The train and equip program produced a handful of fighters who immediately were captured by or defected to Al-Qaeda and or ISIS. U.S. airdrops of weapons ended up in the hands of ISIS 8 times out of 10, according to University of Oklahoma Syria expert Joshua Landis. Of course, ISIS, brought to you by your friends from the One World Order and the CIA. Okay, continue on here. The solution to this failed policy is not to abandon the U.S. regime change plans for Syria and let the Russians take care of ISIS and the Al-Qaeda problem for us. No, for this administration, the answer is U.S. boots on the ground. And while the rest of them use Palmolive soap in the dish bowl, okay? President Obama, according to senior administration officials, will start by infiltrating some 50 special forces troops into parts of Syria controlled by the Kurds and the Syrian Democratic Forces. These Syrian Democratic Forces are a mysterious new group created and marketed by the U.S. administration. They seem as dubious as the similarly U.S. touted Khorasan group, made up by an organization that provided a pretext for the expansion of U.S. bombing to Syria just over a year ago. According to Obama's new strategy, the U.S. military will be on the ground and fighting in Syria, fighting alongside Kurdish fighters who are being bombed by America's NATO ally, Turkey. What are these U.S. forces to do when they look overhead and see Turkish fighter jets is about to bomb them? They will shoot down American-made F-16s flown by NATO ally Turkey into Syria. How will the Turks take to the U.S. shooting down its fighters in that case? And what about the Russian bombs falling on Syria? As the U.S. refuses to give Russian government coordinates for the rebels it considers moderate, there is a little way for the Russians to know how which is fighting a group will contain embedded U.S. Special Forces. Is this not starting to look really foolish and dangerous? Last March, Secretary of State John Kerry condemned the Russian military presence in Crimea after a coup overthrew the Ukrainian government with the memorable words, you just don't, in the 21st century behave in the 19th century fashion by invading another country on completely trumped up in pretext. Yet the U.S. military in Syria, against the wishes of the sovereign and legal Syrian government, is orders of magnitude more illegal than even the Russian presence in Crimea, which was after all the result of a long-standing treaty between Russia and Ukraine. Could we say, yes, I love doublespeak. You can't do it, but I can. Yeah, up yours too. Just last month at the United Nations, President Obama condemned those major powers who assert themselves in the ways that contravene international law, but there is no UN Security Council resolution permitting the United States to conduct military operations in Syria, which means the whole operation is in the gross violation of international law. More importantly, President Obama has today embarked on another hot war in the Middle East with no congressional declaration, no congressional authorization, and not even a proper notification. Congress lays down and rolls over the Constitution in flames. Remember when you think of President Obama's new war on Syria. That's right. So how come the people in the House are not saying anything? And as I heard, there's a new House Speaker in town, the neocon flip-flopping scumbag stooge himself, Paul Ryan, who is nothing more than just another Uncle Tom to the elite, who will bow down and drop his drawers and go, yes, master, can I have another? Another example, my friends, to all those folks out there that were protesting against Bush and Cheney and the invasion of Iraq. How come they're not? They should be doing the same thing to their Lord and Savior, Barrier Sotoro, who loves reading teleprompters and go, "Yes, Master, can I have another?" And he's the one who says to people at one time, "Christians, hold on your high horses," and he forgot to say, "and be a bend over Bob like me." Okay, this is how I look at the President of the United States, another globalist puppet, of course. But it was interesting because on the no boots to the ground, like he makes all these denials, and of course there's a video link on here on the no boots to the ground or the speeches he made, and it's so hilarious. It's like watching Laurel and Hardy. It's like 46 minutes long. And this is why you can hear him all talk all the smack you want coming from his teleprompter. Of course, that is that is Barry Soetoro himself. If you watch this video, he says, "I promise I will not put no boots on the ground in Syria." Yeah, well, he did it again. Sold his soul to the military-industrial complex. And of course, there's a video by Chris Razzini on the Ron Paul Liberty Report, a montage of lies, no boots on the ground in Syria, which is like an hour 46 minutes long, and we all know he talks a lot of smack as usual. And what's interesting about that, because there was one gentleman named Tatum, right? Yeah, Tatum, Chip Tatum, and Chip Tatum was considered to be a CIA operative in the 70s and 80s. And what was interesting about him, because he talks about Obama sends troops to Syria and to sacrifice them, 3,000 troops to be sacrificed, and they're going to try to blame it on the Russians so they can all go on the warmongering beat and go bashing, go F Putin, which I'm not saying I'm a fan of his by any means. So this is like it came out on the 28th here. This is from allnews.network, which is actually his site, and he talks about the whole thing on the Obama sending the U.S. troops to the ground, and it's something to check it out. And of course, he had that one clown from the Department of Defense. I don't know that I forgot the Joker's name. He looks like Oompa Loompa, I would say. So I'm gonna add that to it so you guys can read it yourself. And yeah, actually, it's veteran you know Veteran Truth Network. So you can check his site out. It looks like it came out recent. This came out like I think September. So this brand new, and of course an interview he did too on the Truth Warriors, which is actually by Glenn Candacy, right? I hope I can pronounce his name right. Yeah, Glenn Kennedy. Okay, from project.nsearch.com. Here's like a 10-minute interview with Gene Tatum, who's informed that that got word from his friends in the military, in the United States military, that they're sending 3,000 ground troops into Syria to fight with the Free Syrian Army. Nobody can find, and he said U.S. commanders have told Gene they fear that they are being set up to be killed and be blamed on the Russians. So it could be a possible inside job, according to this interview. But like I said, I'm not gonna make any suggest recommendations. But the whole thing is we have to really focus on that because that is considered antebellum to World War III. All right, because I know a lot of folks talked about it, like it's gonna start in the Middle East or China. It doesn't matter, but it's very dangerous. And hopefully, when you guys check out these other footnotes, you send this to everyone as quick as you can. I did share some of this information on my Facebook and Twitter and my Google Plus pages, and just carry the ball because we don't want another war. And there's actually too. I have a stepfather who served in Vietnam. He's seen a lot of bloodshed. And he goes, most of the veterans overall, the veterans support peace. They don't want another war. So to all those neocons, if they want to go attack Russia, you say you get your fat butt out there and see how tough you really are. All right, to all you neocon hacks out there, if you love going to war, you know what? You go on the front line. Not your kids, but you. Let's see how tough you are. Male, female, doesn't matter what you look like. Okay, so definitely examine these links, and you can make your own judgment. And speaking of All News Network, there's another one I'm going to be checking out here. Came out today, again by Chip Tatum. It says here China warns U.S. against minor incidences that could spark war. All right. And he because the whole All News Network is based out of Tampa, Florida, and he says here by Chip Tatum 2 days ago I shouted out following a meeting with Chinese officials in Miami that this was coming down the pike. We need to really watch our step. Call your congressman. According to the officials I spoke to, they allow the U.S. to violate their water so they can collect data on the ship. They had monitoring facilities both on the island and on the sea, monitoring signals, data, and movements. We will need this data to evaluate for future as we are prepared for a defensive battle. China has issued its strongest warning yet to U.S. over an incident during which U.S. destroyer sailed within territorial waters of China's man-made island in the South China Sea, claiming that U.S. faces running the risk of a minor incident that sparks war. On Tuesday, the Aegis destroyer USS Laston entered within 12 nautical miles of Subi Reef, an undersea cliff in the South China Sea, which Beijing turned into an artificial island. The destroyer was reportedly traveling with the Navy surveillance airplane near the contested Spratly Islands. China views the man-made creation as part of its territories and claims territorial sovereignty over the waters surrounding it. Addressing the issue of U.S. intrusion on Thursday in a video teleconference, Admiral Yung Shangli warned the chief of the U.S. Naval Operations, Admiral John Richardson, to refrain from further provocative acts. That's quoted. If the United States continues with these kinds of dangerous provocative acts, there could be a seriously pressing situation between frontline forces from both sides on the sea and in the air, or even a minor incident that sparks war, Wu said, according to the Chinese naval statement. I hope the U.S. side cherishes the good situation between the Chinese and U.S. navies that has not come easily and avoids these kinds of incidences from happening again, Wu added. Commenting on the bilateral exchange during the teleconference, an American official told Reuters that both sides agreed to avoid clashes. The U.S. and Chinese navies also decided to maintain dialogue and follow protocols stipulated under the Code of Unplanned Encounters at Sea, or anchoring for Qs. They have agreed that it's very important that both sides continue to use protocols under the Qs agreement when they're operating close to keep the chances for misunderstanding and any kind of provocation from occurring, said the official. The U.S. Navy stressed that it is entitled to protect the rights, freedoms, and lawful uses of the seas and airspace guaranteed all nations under international law. Following the incident, Beijing has summoned the American ambassador to protest a provocative maneuver that, according to China's foreign ministry, placed personnel and infrastructure to the island in jeopardy. Close to 200 Chinese troops are believed to be stationed at Subi Reef. The reef is also claimed by Taiwan, Vietnam, and the Philippines. Subi Reef lies 500 nautical miles away from Hainan Island, the nearest Chinese shoreline, but only 230 nautical miles from the island of Palan in the Philippines, which disputes Beijing's territorial claim. On Thursday, the court in Hague ruled that it is the jurisdiction to adhere to territorial claims that were filed by the Philippines over the disputed area in the South China Sea. The UN-based body will hold further hearings to settle the issues, but they will not focus on sovereignty, but rather economic entitlements. The arbitration concerns the role of historic rights and the source of maritime entitlements in the South China Sea, the status of certain maritime features in the South China Sea and the maritime entitlements they are capable of generating, and the lawfulness of certain actions by China in the South China Sea that are alleged by the Philippines to violate the convention. A press release issued by the Permanent Court of Arbitration read. So, so this whole thing is about territorial rights, and usually in international waters, a nation has 12 nautical miles. Yeah, hopefully I pronounced that right. Yeah, nautical miles as like international waters, and sometimes you got to be very very cautious when you're representing another foreign nation and you're going in those areas within 12 nautical miles. And that's why, so that's the whole thing is, that's like territorial. What would happen if China and Russia were sailing the United States within 12 nautical miles on our shores? That's like, people say it would be an act of war when you think about it. So you can't really have both ways. But the truth of the matter is, this is like really touchy, okay? Because the whole thing is what's been happening, okay, with the whole thing in Syria and so forth, and ISIS not being comforted and aided by the CIA, as far as I'm concerned, the New World Order, one of those entities. Regardless, it's really what's really happening is that even looks like nations in the Middle East, the United States, by the hijacked government are burning bridges with that almost the entire region, except for maybe Saudi Arabia and Israel. And now they're all joining forces, Iran and Russia, China. So it's like they're all starting to align. Because what happened was there was even reports that even Russia was taking care of the whole thing. ISIS. The whole thing is like it's called blowback, which the CIA uses terminology. Blow back in their faces. It has happened so many times. This is why, and now with this, you don't want it backfiring either. But I do have to agree, the people from both sides don't want to go to war. Okay? And that's one thing you have to really pay attention on what's happening in that part of the world, the South China Sea area, and the Middle East. This is very touchy times, and everyone needs to pay attention. And I recommend prepare yourselves at the best of your capabilities. Okay. All right. Next one here, which I find is very fascinating, is from The Guardian. Came out yesterday. And it's entitled UN Staff Circulated Child Abuse Images on Work Emails. It's by Joe Sandler Clark. Internal report reveals UN staff members were sacked after they shared child abuse images on the organization's computers. 4 UN staff members have been sacked for distributing and storing child abuse images on work computers and email accounts in the last 18 months, while 10 more have been fired for child rape and sex abuse cases in the last decade, according to the internal UN report. But the UN has no record of any criminal actions have been brought against the members of staff. Commentators suggest that the way the cases have been dealt with raises questions about how the UN responds to sex abuse allegations. The case among several hundred cases in an internal annual report, which is a link for that, on disciplinary matters and cases of criminal behavior in the organization for the period of July 2014 and June this year. The staff who are not named are accused of distributing pornographic material involving a minor, using their UN email accounts, as well as storing material on the organization's computers. Reports going back to 2007 reveal that 4 more staff members have been disciplined for distributing child abuse images in the last 8 years. In 2007 through 8, a member of staff was found to have repeatedly used UN laptops to download and view pedophile material. Staff member is reported to have persisted with such conduct even after being formally warned for misusing UN property. As punishment, the individual was separated from service with compensation in lieu of notice, without termination and indemnity. 3 more staff members were dismissed in 2011 for distributing child abuse images. A further 10 cases going back for 2004-5 were found where UN staff members engaged in sexual activity with minors, including several rape cases. None of the reports referred to any criminal action being brought against the personnel. A spokesperson from the UN said the organization has referred all credible allegations of criminal conduct, including those relating to sexual exploitation and abuse and the distribution of storage of child pornography images by officials and experts on a mission, to the states of nationality since the General Assembly adopted Resolution 62/63 on criminal accountability of United Nations officials and experts mission in 2007. However, these spokespersons also said the UN was not aware of any criminal convictions relating to cases of sexual exploitation and abuse in child pornography. He said the organization has been requested to cooperate in any national proceedings. The reports also highlighted other criminal acts committed by UN officials, including one staff member who was dismissed for using an official vehicle to transport approximately 173 kilograms of marijuana. One member of staff was disciplined for trying to transport a chainsaw on UN passenger plane without authorization, while another was reprimanded for stealing $2,200 from the luggage a passenger traveling on a United Nations flight. The UN has been dogged by sexual abuse allegations against staff members and officials throughout this year. In April, The Guardian revealed that the UN official has been suspended for leaking reports detailing sexual abuse committed against street children in Central African Republic to French authorities. Weeks earlier, an internal report described sexual abuse as a significant risk to UN peacekeeping missions. The organization has also faced criticism for failing to pass all rape allegations made against the staff onto the relevant national authorities. Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has described sexual abuse in U.S. peacekeeping a cancer in our system. Brian Connick, Executive Director at the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti, an advocacy organization which advocates for human rights in the country, which has significant U.S. peacekeeping presence, says that the UN has handled these cases is far from ideal. The UN's response shows how deeply UN's head is buried in the sand regarding sexual abuse, said Concanen. Yep. An organization seriously committed to reducing abuse will track the cases it refers to the staff's home countries, so it knows how well its own investigations are working and whether it needs to require improvements in accountability before accepting more staff from that country. Well. There's been talks about the United Nations for a long, long time. Of course, the stuff that's happening in Haiti, Rwanda, even in the UN facilities around the country and the world. Very interesting, and this is why I am not a fan of this organization. And they want to try to tell all of us how to live, and they can't even clean their own clocks. I was never, ever fond of this entitlement whatsoever. And how come these people are getting a slap on the wrist? If some nations, they'll throw our behinds in jail, or maybe get stoned to death, one of the two. This is how the UN wants to run our lives. And I know I'm digressing, and I apologize for that. Because they have these so-called diplomatic immunities, they can do whatever they want. And that's wrong. This is why I want the United States out of the United Nations and use that building in New York that was funded, established by the Rockefellers, treat it as one big, smelly outhouse. That's all it is with the United Nations. There's too much dirt in there, which is insane. And you got people downloading stuff on their own property. Governmental property tells you it's just an example how many sick bastards are in here. It's just an example. It's not just the United Nations alone. I say the hell with them. They need us more than we need them. All right. Well, next one here actually came from the New American. Woo, yeah. And this was entitled SPLC Unhinged. Almost everyone is a conspiracy theorist. This is written by Alex Newman. Quick, do something. There are John Bush Society types ready to spread conspiracy theories from the margin into the mainstream, and they seem to be hiding under practically every bed in America. At least that's the impression given in a new intelligence report by the far left Southern Poverty Law Center, an organization whose slanderous vitriol against conservatives and Christians was recently implicated in federal court in a recent terrorism case. In this report, the Southern SPLC reputedly aims to expose false conspiracy theories that are being churned out by right-wing radicals. But ironically, while expressing outrage over conspiracy theories on the right, the SPLC reports sounded like an expanded version of Hillary Clinton's bizarre conspiracy theory about a vast right-wing conspiracy. To hear the SPLC tell it, practically everyone in America to the right of Obama is participating in a giant conspiracy to spread conspiracy theories. For what purpose is never explained, although apparently it is all very bad for democracy. Through the SPLC clings to a mantle of respectability given to it for claiming right to right wrongs. Mainstream American Family Association has labeled the SPLC as an anti-Christian hate group. Meanwhile, civil rights attorneys and Southern Center for Human Rights President Stephen Bright, echoing investigations, and a federal judge blasted SPLC founder Morris Dees as a con man and a fraud who exploits naive poor people to enrich himself. In keeping with critics' accusations against the SPLC, the intelligence report reads, like it's based on either a fevered imagination or blatant deception, driven by hate against those with whom it disagrees. So far, though, the report has been largely ignored. The controversial outfit, sounding almost unhinged, rallied against parents concerned about the Obama-backed Common Core education scheme. Americans alarmed about Obama's gun control scheming, alternative media, talk radio, cable television, politicians who give voice to the concerns of the constituents, and much more. But the group efforts to demonize broad swaths of the American public, essentially everyone less enamored with big government than the Obama administration is now in the SPLC's crosshairs, has led to its loss of influence over public opinion. After labeling mainstream Christian groups supporting traditional marriage as hate groups, the SPLC took a major blow. It was also exposed, working with the federal government to generally demonize Christians and Jews. Then it attacked presidential candidate Ben Carson for allegedly extremism for supporting the biblical definition of marriage, sparking outrage across the political spectrum, and the paranoid hysteria is starting to take its toll. Indeed, while groups every otherness once sparked a cascade of news stories in the establishment press, virtually nothing has been reported on the latest ramblings except by the SPLC and critics eager to ridicule the group. InfoWars, for example, with web traffic levels that dwarf much of the establishment media, seized upon the SPLC's attacks against parents who were concerned about Common Core to poke fun at the leftist group. The SPLC labeled InfoWars chief Alex Jones, who is one of the top 10 radio talk show hosts in America, a hyperventilating conspiracy theorist for opposing Common Core. The online alternative media giant, in an article by Kit Daniels, pointed out the most opposition to Common Core is based on its well-documented bad academics, terrible standards, outrageous math schemes, and more. Not conspiracy theories. The SPLC consistently appears to have trouble with basic terminology, labeling ideas with which it disagrees as conspiracy theories, despite the fact that most of the non-theatrical criticism it rails against contains no trace of allegations of conspiracy. In a press release about its report, for instance, SPLC accused Senator Rand Paul, Republican from Kentucky, of embracing a conspiracy theory when he blasted Common Core as a dangerous new curriculum. But aside from the fact that Paul's statement is not a theory and it does not allege a conspiracy, Common Core financier Bill Gates famously agreed that Common Core is driving an entirely new curriculum. Well, no, we succeeded when the curriculum and the tests are aligned to these Common Core standards, Gates told National Conference of State Legislations about his agenda. Gates was not labeled as a conspiracy theorist by the SPLC. The SPLC also abused basic political terminology, perhaps deliberately typing the dupe, the press, and law enforcement with his claims. For instance, the SPLC report constantly refers to what it dubs the radical right and the far right, the ultra-conservatives, and more. Yet when trying to make the radical right individuals appear sinister, it compares them to commonly despised radical leftists, such as the National Socialists, Nazis. Interestingly, the revealed leftist group, the SPLCU's of comparison, actually favor government intervention in all facets of life, loving big government and collectivism almost as much as the SPLC does. The primary difference between the SPLC and the National Socialists surrounds their views on race, but aside from that, a dangerous and deadly anti-liberty ideology of statist and collectivist extremism primates both to the core. In fact, if political ideologies were grouped using a legitimate, useful, and traditional political spectrum, National Socialist Nazis, International Socialists, Communists, Marxists, Leninists, Fascists, Maoists, and the SPLC and its fellow travelers would all occupy the far left of the political spectrum, which represents ideologies in favor of statism in various forms. On the far right, the spectrum would be anarchism. And the ideology, sorry about that, I just had a little. The ideology in favor of no government at all, in between the moderate middle, would include most of the conservative and libertarian groups. The SPLC constantly seeks to falsely demonize in the eyes of its supporters, donors, and more importantly, authorities. Supporting the view that the SPLC supports overreaching government control can be found in the very first paragraphs of the report. It argues essentially that politicians and media figures expressing the concerns of their constituents is somehow bad for democracy. Outlandish conspiracy theories may be great for the movies, but they are highly destructive to our democracy, particularly when mainstream politicians and trusted media figures promote unfounded beliefs that trade knowledge for ignorance and reason for suspicion, said Mark Poduk, editor at the SPLC, in a press release. And in calling out supposed conservative ignorance, the SPLC highlighted its own failings, aside from the fact that most of the statement makes no sense. The American government was founded as a constitutional republic in which the rule of law, not the rule of men, as in democracy, will protect the God-given rights of individuals, or natural rights. born rights, whatever you wanna comprehend. Okay. Also, ironically, on the SPLC's list of the 10 conspiracy theories, most of which are neither conspiracies nor theories, is at least one that the SPLC itself was forced to acknowledge and had credence. In talking about conservatives worry that leftists wish to impose martial law to bring about their agenda, the SPLC said, but there is a real seed from which martial law conspiracy theories common to both segments of the far left and especially to the radical right have grown. Martial law has been declared in the United States about a dozen times, and the most recent after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. More to the point, frightening contingency plans for imposing martial law really have been drawn up. Then they point specifically to the Readiness Exercise 1984 or Rex 84. A plan to suspend the Constitution in the event of crisis, and FEMA's chief discussion of interning 20 million Americans in the event of unrest. On internment camps, the SPLC outdoes itself. It pretends that anyone concerned about internment camps in America is a conspiracy theorist. Yet, it happened before in U.S. history, and the SPLC admits in the same piece was contemplated by the top federal officials even in recent decades. The SPLC also notes that indefinitely interning Americans for their views in camps was recently touted on television by retired general and former Democratic presidential candidate Wesley Clark. As U.S. Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia recently pointed out, you're kidding yourself if you think the same thing internment of Americans in internment camps will not happen again. According to the SPLC, that comment should condemn Scalia to part of the vast right-wing conspiracy rather than simply making a comment that should be obvious to astute observers based on current trends in history, though perhaps tangential. It is true, nonetheless, that Obama famously launched his political career in the home of communist terrorist Bill Ayers, whose Castro-backed cop-killing terror group Weather Underground hoped to intern and exterminate tens of millions of counter-revolutionary Americans, according to FBI agent Larry Grathall, who infiltrated the terror group. The SPLC lauds Ayers on its Teaching Tolerance website aimed at children and schools, though Ayers' only regret about being a terrorist was not planting more bombs. About the conspiracy theories, too, the SPLC either reveals its own ignorance or passes off deliberate lies. On the prospect of the North American political integration into a European Union-style body based on NAFTA, for instance, the SPLC claims there is, of course, no such union to plan to merge the three nations into borderless mass that uses a single currency, the euro. In the real world, U.S. official U.S. embassy documents leaked by WikiLeaks confirmed that such a plan has been underway for almost a decade at least. Indeed, the document even uses the term monetary union as in the process to use to foist a single currency on Europe. Perhaps the SPLC merely needs better researchers. These clowns need to get shut down. Okay? Highlighting the wrongness of the SPLC's claims, the latest architect of the plot, Robert Pastor, at the Globalist Council on Foreign Relations, credited the John Birch Society's educational efforts with quashing its North American integration agenda. The SPLC doubles down on every other issue it highlights. For example, on the Federal Reserve, the outfit blasts critics of the Fed who deride the fact that it virtually caters to the rich and politically connected. Yet the SPLC fails to explain how the debt-based fiat monetary system or the privately owned Federal Reserve actually work for the good of the people. On guns, it demonizes fears of a gun grab as a conspiracy theory, even as Obama and Hillary Clinton openly touted Australians gun confiscation program as a potential model for America. The SPLC also claimed that there is no anti-Christian homosexual agenda in the same sentence as it outlines in its own distorted view of a homosexual agenda, then suggests that all who oppose this agenda, which would have included Obama, at least based on his public statements just a few years ago, are part of the vast anti-gay agenda conspiracy. Seriously. In a typical SPLC fashion, the most vitriol was reserved for the John Birch Society, the constitutional organization that has chapters in all 50 states and works to educate Americans about politics, economics, and culture. It is the parent organization of the New American. The SPLC wrote, named a right-wing conspiracy theory of the last 60 years, and chances are the John Birch Society was sitting near the front of the bandwagon, suggesting that it believes the JBS is an integral part of the vast right-wing conspiracy to promote conspiracy theories. In the real world, the JBS deals with truth and education and has been consistently proven accurate since it was founded in 1958. The SPLC classifies the society as a patriot group, with the word patriot in SPLC speak meaning something negative. In an email to the New American, JBS CEO Art Thompson responded to SPLC's attacks. It is interesting that the SPLC mentions us 9 times. It appears that we are the biggest burr under their saddle. The SPLC makes its living and has grown rich by demonizing anything that opposes the march toward socialism in America. They throw in some rather unsavory organizations with responsible organizations and individuals to tar brush all opposition with an image of extremism. Yet the extreme opinions of the SPLC linked into the now radical Justice Department are helping destroy the American system of local police in favor of a national police. The linkage between the SPLC and the Obama administration has helped create a climate of division in our country when what is needed is neighborliness and harmony in our communities. Basically, everyone appears to be part of the SPLC's imaginary conspiracy to spread conspiracy theories from the margins to the mainstream. Here is a partial list of the right-wing forces demonized in the SPLC's latest manifesto. Texas Governor Greg Abbott, Alaskan politician Sarah Palin, former Fox News host Glenn Beck, politicians from around the country and all levels of government, pundits, a large number of Christian right and anti-LGBT groups, historian David Barton, Eagle Forum founder Phyllis Schlafly, the American Principles Project conservative commentator Michelle Macklin, U.S. Representative John Bernstein, Republican from Oklahoma, American Policy Center founder Tom DeWeese, U.S. Representative Louis Gohmert, Republican from Texas, U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, Republican from Texas, the Republican National Committee, the Constitution Party, and former diplomat and conservative activist Alan Keyes, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, U.S. Representative Virgil Goode, Republican from Virginia, and former Representative Ron Paul, Republican from Texas, Representative Walter Jones, Republican from North Carolina, former Representative Tom Tancredo, Representative Tom Tancredo, Republican from Colorado, late Conservative Caucus founder Howard Phillips, WND investigative journalist and best-selling author Jerome Corsi, Media Research Center Chief Brent Basel, Bay Buchanan of Team America, Joan Horter with the American Council for Immigration Reform, Reverend William Owens with the Coalition of African American Pastors, Ronald D. Reyes with the Coalition of American Veterans, Chris Simcox with the Minutemen Civil Defense Corps, Elizabeth Reindiner on the National Council on Bible Curriculum in Public Schools, a prominent Jewish attorney, David Yerushalmi, anti-Shahira activist Pamela Geller, former Texas GOP Chief Kathy Adams, National Rifle Association NRA Executive Vice President Wayne LaPierre, conservative pundit Ann Caller, Fox News contributors and former Clinton operative Dick Morris, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Oath Keeper founder Stuart Rose, newsman Gary Frianchi, which he does the Next News Network. Check it out; it's really good stuff. American automaker Henry Ford, author and internationally renowned lecturer Edward Griffin, the 700 Club host Pat Robertson, Christian Action Network chief Martin Meyer, Faith to Action founder Janet Porter, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, Trail Life USA chief Stan Berger, conservative radio host Janet Maffer, anti-jihad author Andrew McCarthy, WorldNet Daily, Fox News host Sean Hannity, and even ABC News for good measure. I'll say this: some people I'm not too fond of, and some people there are meritable. I'll be very fair. Continue on as the SPLC self-destructs and leaves what remains of its credibility to tatters. Americans might find it emulating to read its report than research each of the conspiracy theories highlighted by the SPLC. Of course, the outfit often throws in straw men arguments to debunk instead of addressing actual concerns of conservatives, but waiting the propaganda and discovering the truth in is hardly difficult, and it would be a very useful exercise for most Americans. The fact is that while the SPLC may not want readers to believe it, history has been strongly influenced by groups of individuals working together for nefarious purposes. The very definition of conspiracy. Just this month, the Obama administration charged former United Nations General Assembly President John Ash and various Chinese communists with a criminal conspiracy. Yet the SPLC did not identify the Obama Justice Department as a right-wing conspiracy theorist. Anyone who does not acknowledge that conspiracies abound either has no understanding of history and current events or is trying to play you for a fool. There is indeed a real danger to American values and constitutional government from groups such as the SPLC and its allies, including the increasingly lawless Obama administration, which is now partnering with a radical group to target Christians, conservatives, dissidents, and others the SPLC hates. Numerous other outfits are participating in the assault on the U.S. sovereignty and liberty, as this magazine has documented extensively over a period of decades. But if enough Americans were educated on the facts, Congress should defund the agenda, leave the marginalized SPLC to spew its hatred and paranoid conspiracy theories harmlessly until its giant endowment runs dry or it runs out of tin foil. It is very intriguing to read about this, and a person like myself has a lot of contempt for this subversified entity. I'll be very honest. I remember they made a movie about Morris Dees and about the fighting the Ku Klux Klan. That's how the Southern Poverty Law Center started. As time goes by, examining his rhetoric, I see a plant, a straw man, another clown. That's how I view Morris Dees on his actions. And I'm not the only one who sees this. There's even, if I'm correct too, that there's even past reports, archived reports, that the FBI has don't even use the Southern Poverty Law Center anymore. So right now, they're shooting blanks. They're trying to use the same old rundown, like an old syndicated show. Now with technology, people can really take the initiative on looking and examining and studying these entities or foundations. This is why I'm laughing, because they are shooting blanks. This tyrannical organization. I have no fond of Morris D's, and even some of their lackeys. I even saw some of their, one time on the Real News, they had one of these clowns talk about the Bundy Ranch, and it's all like, oh, they're racist, they're radicals, this and that. You know what? That guy needs a penile microphone. Only way to do this, my friends, is tell the SPLC to stick it. If you don't like if you despise the Klan, if you despise the Nazis, you treat them the same way. Plain and simple. Because you know why? The Southern Poverty Law Center is just like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson. Divide and rule is their business. They want to benefit more, and they don't give a damn who you are, but they'll try to exploit you one way or the other. So you know what? I want to see the Southern Poverty Law Center go under, because that will be fantastic. And Morris D's, take them to the poorhouse, as far as I'm concerned. All right, yeah, it's like a little bit of rant here, but that's okay. I'm about to go a little bit over. That's all right. But I'm gonna take a little breather and be right back. So stay tuned. Okay, I am back. Yeah. Well, I'm just gonna hit this next one here. Very interesting. I got this from a podcast last week, and from the American Statesman. That's the name of the show. Very good. There's some folks from Florida, and she's very constitutionally inclined. And one of the people who did the interview was talked about the United States of America Department of Travel, and it's really cool. Like I'm just gonna read some of the stuff here, and see if you guys can make your own decisions. Like it says here, the mission statement: the United States of America Department of Travel is a de jure governmental agency that provides a constitutional alternative to and for automobile owners to classify and record their private conveyance instead or in conjunction with, if still using commerce purposes, of registering with the Department of Motor Vehicles. So if it's commercial commerce or commerce purposes, if not, then you don't have to go through those DMV registrations. It says the purpose, the Department of Travel is not established to replace the Department of Motor Vehicles. Rather, it is formed to provide a lawful remedy to automobile owners to record their private property as a household effects without the requirement of licensing, registration, or forced insurance. There is a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation requiring licensing, registration, and titling of automobiles. It is imperative that every automobile owner understands the law and requirements for exemptions in reference to registering their private automobile. The Department of Motor Vehicles is a de facto government agency that has jurisdiction over registering, licensing, and titling of motor vehicles and driven on the highways. If you operate or drive a motor vehicle that you're required by law registered to that motor vehicle with DMV. And it's very interesting about that. And we'll just check, that's their mission. And it's interesting to talk about the right to travel. And we'll just look at that. And it says right here, no law requires you to register, pledge your private automobile. A private automobile is not required by any law, code, or statute to be registered. Any registering pledge of private automobile to an agency is strictly voluntary. Any recordation contact you or your dealership has done was a fraudulently conveyed act as a registering agency automobile dealer told you that you must register your private property. The voluntary pledge that was done without just compensation is usually done through fraud, deceit, coercion, and withholding of facts, which only be construed as fraud and unjust enrichment by agency, as well as its willful malicious acts to unjust enrich the recording agency and its public servants. If men through fear, fraud, or mistake should in terms renounce or give up any natural right, the eternal law of reason, and the grand end of society would absolutely vacate such renunciation. The right to freedom of being the gift of Almighty God, if it is not in power of man to alienate this gift and voluntarily become a slave. Samuel Adams, our former president. Men are endowed by their Creator yet with such unalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and to secure, not grant or create these rights, governments are instituted. That property which a man has honestly acquired he retains full control of, subjects to these limitations. First, that he shall not use it to his neighbor's injury, and that does not mean that he must use it for its neighbor's benefit. Second, that if he devotes it to a public use, he gives it to the public a right to control that use. And third, that whether the public needs requires, the public may take it upon of due compensation. Budd versus the People, State of New York. That was in 1892. It says here, there should be no arbitrary deprivation of life, liberty, or arbitrary spoliation of property. Police power due process. Barber versus Connolly. And that came as Barber versus Connolly and Yik Yo versus Hopkins. Interesting. Constitution guarantees and protects the right to travel, but whenever the operation and effect of any general regulation is to extinguish or destroy that which by the law of the land is the property of any person, so far it has that effect, it is unconstitutional and void. Thus, a law is considered as being a deprivation of property within the meanings of the constitutional guarantee. If it deprives an owner of one of its essential attributes, destroys its values, restricts or interrupts its common, necessary, or profitable use, hampers the owner in the application of it to the purposes of trade, or imposes condition upon the right to hold or use, and thereby seriously impairs its values. That's the statute 167 AM, Jur. D2 Constitutional Law, Section 369. Constitutional Law, Section 101, Right to Travel. 5. The nature of the Federal Union and the constitutional concepts of property, liberty, unite, personal liberty, unite, to require that all citizens be free to travel throughout the length and breadth of the United States, uninhibited by statutes, rules, or regulations which unreasonably burden or restrict this movement. 6. Although not explicitly mentioned in the federal Constitution, the right freely to travel from one state in another is a basic right under the Constitution. So you could say the Ninth Amendment, enumerated rights. Constitutional Section 101, law chilling assertion of rights. 7. If a law has no other purpose than to chill the assertion of the constitutional rights by penalizing those who choose to exercise them, then it is patently unconstitutional. Shapiro versus Thompson. Interesting case there. So you folks might have to look this up yourselves, okay? So take the initiative on doing that. All right, we'll just hit the next one here on private vehicle recordation. And it shows you public registration about your vehicle. And this is all based out of Florida, looks like here. And one owner. And it has images on here. All right. on public motor vehicle before, and private recordation, automobile private recordation, and everything's all like right there. There's no expiration date, so it shows you what it can do. It says here that above the images and below are the same automobile. As you can see, the above image represents a typical public motor vehicle registration, reflecting an issue date and expiration date. The image below represents a private automobile recorded has no expiration date. This automobile had a public registration that expired on June 30th, 2015, but had recorded the private information with the land of Florida on June 29, 2015 to avoid any unlawful activity. So it shows you this from the state of Florida's website that this thing is no expiration date on here on private recordation, but public registration, yeah, it has all the dates and all that good stuff. So it tells you all that. It says here the United States Department of America Department of Travel does not register motor vehicles within their system and have no authority to do so. All motor vehicles must be registered with the Department of Motor Vehicles within each respective state. So, like it says right here, does not register within the system and have no authority to do so. All motor vehicles might be registered with them. So at least you give them the documentation, and it's got to be in their records. That's what it says here on private recordation. And it says, of course, furthermore, the USA DOT only records private automobiles or private conveyances which are not used on the highway in connection with the business whereby the owner of the automobile does not have any remuneration received. So it's personal, not business. If you're running like a trucking company, you cannot use this. On your personal vehicles, yes. On commercial purposes or commerce, no. Continue on here. Effect of recording in the U.S. DOT system. By recording a private automobile or private conveyance in the U.S. DOT system, the owner does not waive or confer any rights to the state or the federal government. The recordation of the title owner in the USA DOT database is to provide a national system of record to identify each and every national private conveyance that will be used on highways, roadways, waterways, and airways. This information is in the database as vital in the event of a stolen automobile, so it still be documented then. It can be easily be identified in the US DOT database who lawful owner of the automobile is and will assist law enforcement to be able to identify the automobile in the event an automobile is stolen and to be able to notify the proper owner if the vehicle is recovered. So it's more, you can work with the law enforcement, but somebody have to get registered in the state, but they have those documentations in there as well. You got to share that with them if you want your vehicle back in good faith. So, automobile insurance. Although automobile insurance is not mandatory for a private conveyance, US DOT encourages all vehicle owners to have at least minimum insurance coverage to protect their property from damage or theft. And it also protect other travelers if there is an accident in which they are at fault. Having auto insurance is a responsible action and reduces the financial hardship on all parties in the event of an accident. If one does not have auto insurance and damages someone else's property, it may cause an undue hardship on the damaged party in which they may have to litigate in court to recover damages. This is an unnecessary occurrence that can be avoided by simply maintaining minimum auto insurance. We have links to several insurance providers that offers very affordable insurance rates regardless of your age or economic status. So that's good. So at least they have links and you can take the initiative on checking them out. It's like let's make the insurance company the open free market instead of using neo-mercantilism, all right? And continue on here. Driver's license registration. All automobile owners are not subject to licensing and registration. Only owners of motor vehicles or automobiles for hire are subject to licensing and registration. All automobile owner plates does not have an expiration date as due to the license plates of motor vehicles. For more information and the law regarding license registration exemption, click on the link Traveling and Driving. when licensing is required. And there are links here as well under right to travel, so you can definitely look that up. And let's check this out here. Okay, traveling and trying license. Let's check this out. All right, it says here, right to travel without permission versus privilege to drive with permission. And like it says right here, as we can see, the distinction between right to use public roads and the privilege to use public roads is drawn upon a line of using the road as a place of business, and the various states courts have held so. But what have the U.S. court held on this point? First, it was well established law that the highways of the state are public property, and their primary and preferred use for private purposes, and their use for purposes of gain in special and extraordinary, which, generally at least, the legislator may prohibit or condition as it sees fit. Stephen versus Rhineford, Packner versus Baton, and cases cited Frost and F. Truckee Company versus Railroad Commission, Railroad Commission versus Intercity Ford Company, Parlet Cooperative versus Tidewater Lines. It is now apparent, according to law, that an attempt to use the road as a place of business is a privilege. The distinction must be drawn between traveling upon and transporting one's property upon public roads, which one's right and which is not subject to licensing and registration, using public roads as a place of business or mainly instrumentally of business, which is a privilege requiring licensing and registration. The roads are constructed and maintained at public expenses, and no person therefore can assist that he has said or may acquire a vested right to their use in carrying on a commercial business. Ex parte Sterling, Barney versus Railroad Commissioners, Stevenson versus Binford, Supra. And there's another one right here. When the public highways are made in a place of business, the state has the right to regulate their use in the interest of safety and convenience of the public, as well as the preservation of the highways. Thompson versus Smith, Supra. The state's rights to regulate such use is based upon the nature of the business and the use of the highways in connection therewith. We know of no inherent right in the use of the highways for commercial purposes. The highways are primarily the use of the public and in the interest of the public. The state may prohibit or regulate the use of highways of gain. Robertson versus Department of Public Works. There should be considerable authority on a subject as important as the deprivation of the liberty of the individual using the roads in the ordinary course of life and business. However, it should be noted that extensive research has not turned up in one case or authority acknowledging that states' powers to convert the individual right to travel upon the public roads into a privilege. Therefore, it is concluded that a citizen does have a right to travel and transport his property upon the public highways and roads, and the exercise of this right is not a privilege. Right there. So, they have right to travel. You don't have special status. That's more like a privilege. And let's check out here where licensing is required. When licensing and registration is required, automobile classified as motor vehicles. The Washington State Supreme Court has already made it clear in the following case that the driver's license is intended to apply only for hired vehicles. Section 183, it shall be unlawful for any person to drive an automobile or other motor vehicle carrying passengers for hire within the city of Seattle without having a valid and subsisting licenses so to be known as a driver's license. Driver's license first class shall entitle the holder thereto of drive any kind or class of motor vehicles for hire within the city of Seattle. driver's license, second class, shall be limited to stages, sightseeing cars, or other motor vehicles operating over a specified route and having a fixed terminal. Driver's license third class shall be limited to drivers of taxi cabs, for hire cars, or other automobiles not operating on fixed routes, and having a passenger capacity of less than the 7 persons, not including the driver. It is intended to apply for hired vehicles as provided in Section 6313. Rem Comp Stats are defined to mean all motor vehicles other than the automobile stages used for transportation of persons for which remuneration of any kind is received, either directly or indirectly. International Motor Transit Company, et al. Versus City of Seattle, which is number 19992. 251 Pacific Reporter, 120 122-123. That's happened December 6, 1926. For while a citizen has a right to travel upon the public highways and to transport his property thereon, that right does not extend to the use of the highways, either in the whole in part, as a place for private gains. For the latter purpose, no person has a vested right to use the highways of the state, but as a privilege or a license, which the legislator may grant or withhold at his discretion. State versus Johnson, Commons versus Holmes, Packer versus Batten, and Hadfield versus London, which is in Washington here. Here the court held that a citizen has a right to travel upon the public highways, but he did not have the right to conduct business upon the highways. On this point of law, all authorities are unanimous. Heretofore, the court has held, and we think correctly, that while a citizen has a right to travel upon the public highways and to transport his property thereon, that right does not extend to the use of the highways, either in whole or in part, as place of business for private gain. Willis versus Buck. Barney versus Board of Railroad Commissioners. The right of the citizen to travel upon the highway and transport his property thereon in the ordinary course of life and business differs radically and obviously from that one who makes the highway his place of business for a private gain in running of a stagecoach or omnibus. State versus City of Spokane. What is the right of the citizen which differs so radically and obviously from one who uses the highway as a place of business? Who better to enlighten us than Justice Tomlin of the Supreme Court of Washington State? In State versus the City of Spokane, Supra, the court also noted that a very radical and obvious difference, but went on to explain what the difference is. The former is usual and ordinary, the right of citizen, a common right to law, while the latter is special, unusual, and extraordinary. This distinction, elementary and fundamental in character, is recognized by all authorities. This is State versus City of Spokane. This is another case here. This position does not hang precariously upon only a few cases, but has been proclaimed by an impressive array of cases ranging from the state courts to the federal courts. The right of citizen to travel upon the highway and to transport his property thereon in the ordinary course of life and business differs radically and obviously from that one who makes the highway his place of business, is used for private gain in the running of a stagecoach or omnibus. The former is the usual and ordinary right of the citizen, a right common to all, while the latter special, unusual, and extraordinary. This is ex parte Dickey versus Davis. So, and they had like plenty of others in here as well. So, a lot of information on this. And of course, you can show you all that, and of course, the license plates. Yeah. License plates and all that, and they had a list of court's duties on constitutional rights. It was interesting too, because with the whole license plate is a life thing, and it's cost under $300. Okay, the travel card, on the other hand, travel identification card, his address is concealed, okay? Has your height, weight, and date of birth, and expiration date's like every 7 years, okay? And it's like $300. But one thing about it is not a privilege, it's a right. So and it's interesting that who is under a foreign national, and another thing too, your name it starts with a capital letter, the rest is lowercase. If you look at your license, it's all capitalized letters. They try to target you as a corporation. So they have an order list, they have frequent asked questions, and the manual says that the United States Department of State Consular Notification Access. You can read all that yourself. It even talks about the Privacy Act of 1974, which is very interesting, and it is actually under um, Title 5 U.S. Code Section 552A. So you can really look at that too under the Privacy Act. I'll just get that paragraph. It says here, the United States federal law establishes the code of fair information practice that governs the collection, maintenance, use, and dissemination of personally identifiable information about individuals as maintained in systems of records by a federal agency. A system of records is a group of records under the control of an agency for which the information is retrieved by the name of the individual or by some identifier assigned to the individual. Privacy Act requires that agencies give the public notice on their systems of records by publication in the Federal Register. The Privacy Act prohibits the disclosure of information from a system of records absent from written consent of the subject individual unless the disclosure is pursuant to one of the 12 statutory exceptions. The Act also provides individuals with the means by which to seek access to an amendment of their records and set forth various agencies' record-keeping requirements. And it tells you the provisions and the conditions and all that of the Privacy Act, Department of Justice. So I'm not going to go too much into it, but you can really look at this yourselves. It's really interesting. And of course, if you want to order your license plate, it's like $299, no expiration date, and it has you get 2 license plates, national database recording, certificate, and title. And the right to travel, of course, for the travel ID, it's the same thing, expires 7 years. And it's interesting, it says here, includes travel identification, national database recording, certificate of title, publicly recorded affidavits of right to travel, U.S. Department of State instructions for law enforcement, and registration with the Consular of American Nationals. So, yeah, man, so something to really think about. I may just do this myself because I like to have fun with these folks. And you get a contact, you got contact information. They're based out of Washington, D.C. You can send them a message and all that, and restriction of police powers. It's really, really interesting link. And I'm going to add the footnote here on the radio show that made this happen. And it's interesting. It talks about too. It even talks about the common law state. Do you know Florida is a common law state? Why is this important? It talks about common law grand jury and the I-4 toll taxes, which a lot of these are like SunPass, and the MDX, so forth, in Dade County. They're trying to make this have you like pay all these tolls on freeways, okay? And which is considered unconstitutional under Article 7, Section 10, pledging credit. So I'm going to add that link on here as well, so give you clarification. You can hear what they're actually addressing. It's a really good show. I might have to listen to it again, okay? And that is really it. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to listen. Plus, feel free and download this episode throughout your social media network. If you have any questions, comments, compliments, criticisms, love letters, or you want something that information I may find interesting, whatever you do, please address it with decorum. You can hit me on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, which all my footnotes will be on Spreaker for sure, and YouTube. In addition, worldtruth.org. However, if you want to email me with everything I addressed aforementioned, you can hit me on LokiLuck3, which is number 3 is all together, at gmail.com. Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves, keep on spreading the love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.